Hi, my name is Heidi Lavasser, and I live in San Miguel de Allende, and I have a folk art gallery of indigenous artists who are perpetuating the history of Mexico through their artwork. And one of my most favorite artists is Jacobo Mendoza, and we've created this program for him in the hopes that everyone else will enjoy his work and his weaving and his dyeing in the same manner that we've been able to. Jacobo is from a small village in Oaxaca called Teotitlan del Valle. He and his family are Zapotec, and they speak Zapotec as their first language. But I have to tell you that in Mexico, there are 52 spoken languages. Spanish is not the official language. It's just another one of the languages that we all try to learn if we live in Mexico. The Zapotecs are one of the many indigenous cultures in Mexico. And the way to hear Zapotec and understand the Zapotecs is to go to Oaxaca, which is down in the Isthmus of Oaxaca, to visit them. Jacobo clearly has become a genius at his trade, and we're so proud to work with him. Later on in the presentation, we're going to ask you to give us your emails and your so we can contact you with more information. But the best news is we're going to do a raffle of one of Jacobo's rugs, which we're very excited about. But let's go on now and see how great Jacobo is. Barbara.
Okay, it's my turn. So I've known Jacobo for about 18 years, maybe 20 years. I think that I've met Jacobo and Maria Luisa first with my good friend and folk art collector, Rocky Bear. And he came to San Miguel de Allende in 2003, and we had a rug show. And that's how we kind of got started on this program. And since about 2008, Heidi and I have been doing a rug show for Jacobo on Day of the Dead in San Miguel. And it's a really wonderful big event for him, and he brings all of his fabulous pieces, and some of them that have won prizes in national contests. And he makes a picture of Monte Alban, and that is the stronghold of the ancient Zapotec state, which flourished between 300 BC and 700 AD. The Zapotecs were never conquered by the Aztecs, but traded within and throughout Mesoamerica during all that time, and their textiles were highly prized even then. So their monumental sites, Monte Alban, which was the capital, which you see on your screen, and Mitla, which is my favorite, and it's known as a place of rest in the Zapotec language, have inspired the Mendoza's weavings from ever since they started to weave in Teotitlan del Valle, which is their home village. So you can see down here on the map of Oaxaca City, their little star in the middle, you can see they're right in the middle there. So that's where they're located. And when we start looking at Jacobo's rugs, you'll see some designs that are very, very reminiscent of designs on these ancient buildings. One of my favorite historians of weaving and archaeology, Mark Cartwright, says it's possible that the weaving patterns came first before these stone structures have their designs on them. So as we go through this, you'll see the complexity of these designs, and some consider the designs a coded language that is part of the history of the Zapotecs. And Jacobo loves to tell stories about what the designs mean in his pieces. So here's a picture of Teotitlan del Valle, the main church. And the Zapotecs are considered the cloud people. And you can see the clouds behind the church. And actually the clouds in the valley of Oaxaca are astounding. It's a place for sure you want to put on your list, on your bucket list to go and visit. Obviously to visit Jacobo, but just because it's a magical place. And not only is it famous for weaving, but it's famous for pottery, and some very famous Mexican painters also come from this area. And where Jacobo actually lives is called Teotitlan del Valle. And those textiles that have been coming from Teotitlan del Valle since 500 BC are amazing. That was before wool and before the pedal loom, which the Spaniards introduced. So we always say that the Mendozas have been weaving since before the arrival of the Spaniards. Here's a picture of Jacobo and Maria Luisa at home in their backyard, where they grow some of their amazing dye stuffs. Jacobo started to weave when he was 7. He learned from his father, and Maria Luisa learned from Jacobo, and Jacobito and Sylvia, their children, are accomplished weavers. And today Jacobito's acting as our cameraman because he's also technologically advanced. So we're going to switch back. I'm going to stop sharing, and we're going to introduce you now to Jacobo and Maria Luisa, who are in their Dyer, and there we're going to walk through a little bit of the process of weaving. So this is Jacobo. Hi, Jacobo. Hi, Maria Luisa. Bienvenidos to all of our participants. We have 30 people here with us today. And Jacobo, Maria Luisa is going to start by showing us how you start the process of making a rug from sheep to rug. Okay, so here we go. Okay, ándale, Jacobo.
Buenas tardes.
Sí.
Mi nombre es Jacobo Mendoza y mi esposa María Luisa. Vamos a hacer el proceso inicial de la cardada, la preparación de la lana.
So Jacobo is saying he's going to show you, start with the process of carding the wool, which is something that Maria Luisa often does.
Entonces ella va a empezar a hacer el proceso de la peinada.
It's called the combing of the wool, and you can see that the paddles that she has are wooden, and they have spikes on them that make the wool into long fibers, which helps turn it into a very evenly spaced thread, which is very important for making fine wool rugs.
Entonces ella necesita peinarlo varias veces para que la lana esté muy suave y se pueda hilar, hacer un hilo más fino.
So she needs to do it various times to make the threads fine and soft. So I think Jacobo has a basket of the various kinds of wool there. Tiene varios tipos de lana, ¿sí?
Aquí tenemos unas muestras de los diferentes lanas que utilizamos. Esta es la lana local.
This is the local sheep wool.
Y esta es la lana de alpaca de Perú.
This is the alpaca. It's very strong wool.
Y esto es la lana merino.
And this is the merino wool, which is also very high quality wool and strong.
Y entonces también hacemos mezclas de estos diferentes lanas y tenemos diferentes texturas de hilos.
So they make mixes of these various wools together to make the threads. So the threads can be a mix of all these different wools before they use them in their weaving.
Entonces ella, cuando ya termina de hacer el peinado, ella va a hacer una muestra de cómo se hace el hilado con la rueca.
So she's going to show you now, after she finishes carding this wool, how she turns it into a thread. ¿Qué tipo de lana es que María Luisa tiene ahorita?
Ella tiene una mezcla de lana local, 50% y 50% de alpaca.
So she's got local wool and alpaca wool 50-50 in this particular mixture that she's carded. And now she begins to make the thread.
Ella va a hacer un pedacito así muy manual, una mecha, y después va a apoyar con la rueca para hacer el hilo.
So you see that she's pulling out a very tiny bit by hand so that she can start it on her spindle. And she has to do this very evenly. It's very important that the threads are even. If anyone has questions, feel free to type them in the chat and we will watch and make sure, if you have a question, that we can ask Jacobo and Maria.
Ya tengo un pedacito para poder empezar. ¿Mire? La apoyo con la aguja.
Entonces, esto es el proceso del hilado.
This is the process of making the thread, the hilo.
Exactamente. Pero este movimiento tiene que ser muy uniforme en los dos manos para que el hilo tenga una resistencia perfecta.
Okay, so you have to have your movements be very coordinated and very, very exactly the same speed and the same tension in order that you make a very fine and constant size of a thread. You can see how this is quite a job. You can tell Maria Luisa never needs to lift weights. You can see she pulls it out.
Y esto requiere de un buen tiempo para hacer prácticas, para hacer un hilo perfecto. Necesita aprender como mínimo 2 años de práctica.
You have to practice this for 2 years before you can make a really good enough thread that Jacobo would use. ¿Y cuántos años practicaba María Luisa?
Bueno, siempre esto empiezan a aprender cuando son pequeños, después de 8 años.
So you start learning how to do this when you're 8 years old. So Maria Luisa has been doing it for a number of years. And Julia would like to know, Jacobo, Julia quiere saber cómo deciden la mezcla de lana que quieren usar. ¿Es por el tamaño de tapete o las tintas que van a usar?
Por la finura de los tapetes determinamos la calidad del hilo que podemos usar.
For the fineness, Julia, the answer is for the fineness of the piece that they're going to make. They decide what they're going to use, what mixture of wool that they might use. And they also actually use silk, which we didn't mention in this. But they don't spin the silk. They purchase the silk. ¿Sí? Compra la seda, ¿sí?
La seda ya lo compramos ya hecho. Lo que hacemos es ponerle los colores, prepararlo para hacer los colores.
Yeah, so he just he does the dyes on the silk, but he will add it into a mixture of this thread as well. And here's a question from Diane. Does the mass of wool not separate as you form the thread? How to say that in Spanish? Heidi, you have an idea?
Si tú tienes una mezcla de la lana, ¿esta no se separa? ¿Está siempre junto? ¿O hay un problema con la separación?
De los dos tipos.
No hay ningún problema. A veces, si la pieza requiere de un solo tipo de lana, se puede hacer. Pero nosotros siempre mezclamos para que tenga una diferencia las texturas de las piezas.
Entonces, una vez que está juntado para María Luisa con los peines,
sí.
Este sí se queda junto. No
sí,
se
queda junto. Sí.
Y es por eso que están repitiéndolos.
Exactamente, para unirlo muy uniforme.
Entonces, aquí es donde se mezcla conjuntamente la lana local y las lanas que queremos. Y también a veces depende, también hay personas que les gusta pura lana local, entonces hacemos pura lana local. Sí. Hay personas que quieren mezclas porque es lana más suave, más fina.
So do we need to translate that?
I think so.
Okay, so when Maria del Carmen is carding the wool, she's combining it, and once it's combined, when she's pulling it out to make the chain of yarn, it stays together because that's the whole purpose of carding it, is to make it tight in its mixture. So the answer is no, it doesn't separate. Was that the answer?
That's the answer. That's the answer, right? It doesn't separate. It becomes very, very tight, and you'll see it later when we show you the actual rugs, and you'll see how tight the threads are and how small they are once they have been made into the thread.
Bien, entonces cuando ya tenemos terminado de hacer un poco de este hilo en la aguja, lo retiramos el hilo
Mhm.
y utilizamos la rueda para hacer madejas como esto.
Okay, so once they finish turning it into thread, and turning the wheel, they gather it together in skeins that like Jacobo is holding right now so that they can dye it. You can see him holding the skein now of the wool, of the threads.
Después de tener ya las madejas, entonces nosotros tenemos que lavar el hilo y utilizamos la raíz, el jabón prehispánico que se llama amole, es una raíz.
So after they've got it prepared in the skeins that you see Jacobo holding, then they have to wash the wool to prepare it for the dye. And the root that he's holding in his hand is called a mole. And the plant itself is almost invisible on top of the earth. And only the root grows underneath. You can see how large it is, and some are much larger. And this particular root, a mole, they use for soap. Before soap was in the Americas, in Mesoamerica, this was a soap, and Jacobo used it, and Maria Luisa uses it now for her hair as shampoo. Oh, okay, so we got the mole.
¿Sí? Entonces ahorita voy a mostrar los diferentes tipos de hilos ya hechos. Por ejemplo, aquí tenemos totalmente lana local, que es el hilo local.
This is the local sheep and its natural color.
Y estos hilos los utilizamos para hacer tapetes específicamente para pisos.
So the local sheep wool, like that, you see it comes in various colors. They use it for rugs that are only going to go on the floor.
Porque es más grueso y el hilo es más resistente.
So it's because it's a thicker kind of wool and it's very resistant.
Is the local wool always natural colors, or can you use your dyed, the cochineal and the other? You can mix it, or is it always just gray?
Aquí únicamente son colores naturales, pero después, cuando la gente lo desea natural, utilizamos sin color. Pero cuando ellos desean con colores, y ya después los pintamos.
Okay, so it can be colored. Yeah.
Okay. Y aquí tenemos ya una mezcla de lana local y lana merino. Este tipo de hilos utilizamos ya para tapetes, para decoraciones, para mueble o para decoraciones así de sillas o para las casas, o sea, para los muros.
So this can be for walls and it can be for furniture coverings, and it's merino and local wool.
Y aquí tenemos los hilos más finos que utilizamos, que es hilo de casimir, lana muy fina, muy suave, y la lana la seda.
So this is the
seda más grueso y esta seda es el más fino.
Mm-hmm. So those are the finest kind of wools that he uses in his tapetes that win the prizes and go on people's walls and are completely amazing, which we'll see. The ones that win the prizes.
Yo tengo una pregunta, Jacobo. ¿Cuándo llega la seda de Manila? ¿Es de Manila o de dónde? La seda.
No, la seda lo importamos de Japón.
De Japón. Ok, ¿cuándo llega es blanco?
Es blanco, totalmente blanco.
Totalmente blanco, sin color, y tú vas a poner...
Y nosotros, posteriormente ya vamos a ver cómo hacemos el proceso de los colores.
So for whoever didn't understand that, when they import the silk from Japan and it arrives, they only buy white silk without color. And then Jacobo's going to demonstrate in the next step of this program, he's going to demonstrate how the different fibers are colored, which is amazing.
Muy bien. Entonces, estos son los diferentes hilos que utilizamos. Y ahora voy a explicar un poco cómo lo preparamos para empezar a ponerle los colores.
So we're gonna do the start. I think that maybe what we'll do, Jacobo, vamos a demonstrar nuestra presentación otra vez tienes tiempo para preparar, ¿sí?
Sí, está bien.
Okay, I'm gonna share back. We're gonna go back here while he gets ready so that we can talk a little bit about what you're going to see next. So we're gonna, here's a, we call this a mostrario, and it shows you some of the various ingredients that Jacobo is going to use when he shows us the next step in the process of making the colors, which are fantastic. So I want to just point out to you some of the things that you might see here on your screen. This up here in the basket is called morouche, and it makes a fabulous bright yellow color. We're going to see Jacobo do that today. He discovered this as a dye plant in his backyard. Here's moss. You can see various samples of the wool. These are the cempasúchil, or the marigold flowers, which actually make kind of a greenish color. We have the black zapote, which is a tree that grows where Jacobo lives, and when it's not ripe, he can use that and makes an amazing, wonderful brown dye. He uses the nuts like pecans, and this is the cochineal, which Heidi's going to tell you about in just a minute. And limes and alum are some of the fixatives for the dyes. So those are some of that. And here's Jacobo using this new yellow dye. He was the first to discover this plant. It was originally used as a vapor. Women used it to make vapor to steam babies when they were born, to purify them and make sure they were going to be healthy. So here he is. I took this picture in his backyard when he was first discovering the amazing color he learned to make with this dye. Here it is in the dye pot. You'll see him do it in actuality. And here's what it looks like in a rug. Pretty fabulous, don't you think? So now Heidi's going to tell us a little bit about the cochineal plant.
So the cochineal is one of my favorite because I think it has so many different aspects that are interesting. The cochineal is a scale insect that lives on the nopal cactus. So when Cortez conquered Mexico, his main intent, aside from converting everybody to Catholicism and stealing the gold and silver, his other main intent was to find a permanent red dye, a color-fast red dye. And he had heard about the cochineal, which existed on the nopal cactus in Oaxaca and in Chiapas, because it required a warm, moist community of various things for the cochineal to survive on the nopal. So as soon as he had conquered Tenochtitlan, he sent his scouts to Oaxaca and Chiapas to steal the cochineal. And this fuzzy bit on the cactus, the eggs and the cochineal animals are underneath the fuzz, and that they scrape this off and they get a very tiny insect, which they crush. Here is Maria Luisa is crushing this to make the red dye. And here are the eggs down at the bottom part of this. So depending on what's added to the dye bath, he can make them variations of different reds, which we'll show you. But my favorite story, and because I've been telling this story for such a long time about the cochineal and the importance about the cochineal and the fact that it's a natural dye, for years and years, I said, and cochineal is a beetle that lives on the nopal cactus. It lays its eggs on the nopal cactus. The females spend their lives on the nopal cactus, and they're beetles. So one day I was in the studio giving this talk, which I was quite comfortable with. I can't say that I was upset about it or anything, but somebody in my audience, a man, was clearly upset, and he was gesticulating, and I finally had to say, "Excuse me, I would love to hear what you have to say." And he stood up, and in my mind, he was at least 10 feet tall and had a very deep voice and said, "I am a beetleologist, and that is not a beetle." So forevermore, you will all be smarter and wiser than I was. And you will know that it's a scale insect that creates this marvelous color red. And Jacobo works with it in such a manner that it's beautiful. And again, later on in this show, we're going to talk about the raffle we're going to have of a rug that is colored with cochineal. Okay.
So before we go back to Jacobo, I want to say something about the process of dyeing that he uses. It's called slow dye. And in the 20th century, natural dyes went out of favor because actually aniline dyes were introduced. And aniline dyes were fast and bright and colorful, but they were also toxic. So starting in the late 20th century, the slow dye method started to come back around for dyers around the world so that they wouldn't be having to use toxic substances and they could go back to some of the most amazing colors that you can get from natural products. So here's one of Jacobo's recipe sheets that he and Michelle Garcia, who's one of the leaders in the slow dye movement, developed for classes that they give in Oaxaca and that Michelle Garcia gives around the world. So you can see you're supposed to simmer 14 grams of cochineal bugs in a liter of water, right? And filter it, and then you can make a concentration for 4 different dye baths. And depending on the mordant or the fixative you add with it, you get this color, and depending on the percentages of dyes. So you can get 12 colors right here, just with red and just with the different fixatives in the dye. So that's the slow dye method. Takes much, much longer, but the results are spectacular and you will see them, I promise, in the rugs. Here's an example of a fabulous rug that Jacobito made. And we were talking earlier about the designs. This is a design of what they call a danzante from Monte Alban and the very happy woman who purchased it. And you can see the variations of red in this particular piece. So the other thing that we will see Jacobo using today is indigo. And indigo is a plant. A species of indigo plants grow on every continent. You'll find them in India, and Japan in particular loves indigo as a color. Blue jeans were dyed with indigo. And here's the plant. And you need so much of this plant, and I'll ask Jacobo in a minute, and he'll remind us how much of it you need to process in order to make the dye that's here in this cube. And once you have it in the like a rock, then you have to go back and grind it like Maria Luisa did it, and to get it to be in the powder so that they can mix it in the dye baths. And so this is one of the this and cochineal are the 2 very, very expensive colors. They're, because they require so much product in order to produce the brilliant colors that you see in these rugs. And Jacobo discovered how to make a true black, which is very unusual. And he uses the indigo and the black Zapotec that we showed you earlier in the mostrario. And you will see it in some of his works too, because black is something that's almost impossible to achieve with natural dyes. So here we have the indigo and cochineal together, and you can see there are 15 different colors on the recipe card. So now there they are, Maria Luisa preparing the indigo, the cochineal in this particular picture. And here's Jacobo with a green dye bath. Now we're going to stop and we're going to go back to the Dyer with Jacobo, and he's going to show us how to really do it. So go ahead and ask your questions as we go. Okay, Jacobo, ándale.
Ok, bueno, aquí tenemos ya el hilo que tenemos que preparar con algunos minerales.
Barbara.
Uno de ellos utilizamos es alumbre. Y también utilizamos sal del mar.
So we have the wool and we have the alum, which we're going to use in the dye bath.
And sea salt.
And sea salt. I missed that, sorry.
Sal,
Jacobo's bandwidth is a little low because he's way out in the
que...
country, but I hope you can hear him and bear with, and you can obviously ask questions.
Utilizamos también lo que es cal, limestone.
They used limestone, which is cal, which is what they use in the paint originally in Mesoamerica and also in Spanish times on buildings.
Y utilizamos por último jugo de limón.
And lime juice.
Entonces, con estos productos tenemos, esto es el secreto para obtener los buenos colores.
So how you wash what you wash the wool with first, those different fixatives or mordants, is the secret to how you get the beautiful colors.
Entonces, nosotros utilizamos los 4 colores básicos únicamente.
So we only use the 4 basic colors to get every color.
Que es el rojo,
red,
azul,
blue,
amarillo
yellow,
y café.
and brown.
Con estos 4 colores podemos hacer todos los colores que existen.
So I think a thing that I want to say right here is you have to imagine that Jacobo is starting to weave a rug, and he has to have a uniform dye for each color, and it has to be enough to complete the rug. So it's also it's a big mathematical investment, because he needs to know the design, he needs to create the colors for the various parts, and it needs to be all prepared before he starts to weave. So when you look at this and you think of all of this being done in their workshop and being done in their garden, you realize how monumental this is, that it can be so specific and so beautiful. Okay, your turn.
Bueno, entonces, ahorita voy a mostrarle los colores que vamos a pintar, que es el rojo, y vamos a acercar la cámara aquí donde tengo mis recipientes, y vamos a empezar a mostrar esto.
So now we're going to actually color the threads. We're going to start, we have 3 colors here going, and you have the dye baths already ready. And that particular wool has already been washed with the appropriate mordant before he enters it into the dye bath.
Esta es la grana cochinilla.
This is the cochineal dye. You can see how red it is in the pot.
Y esta es la madeja ya preparado. Y vamos a introducirlo al agua de la grana.
Y el agua no está hirviendo, solamente es caliente, ¿no?
La temperatura tiene que ser de 40 grados.
So the temperature has to be 40 degrees Celsius.
Para que el color tenga resistencia.
And so the color will last.
Entonces esto es el rojo, pero necesitamos mínimo como 2 horas para que tenga el color ya final. Entonces, aquí tenemos el otro recipiente que es con las hojas del marush, que vamos a obtener el tono de amarillo.
So this is the color we talked about before, the yellow with the marush plant.
Y
And you
vamos
see
a
the plant
introducir
is actually cooking in there with the threads.
Vamos a introducir la madeja para este recipiente. Es el color muy, muy intenso de amarillo.
You can see it already is beautiful yellow color, like baby chicks.
Y aquí vemos la grana cochinilla. Esta es la otra madeja que pintamos antes del rosado ahorita.
So
Aquí
this is the
tenemos
one
ya
you
2
first did.
tonos.
So they can have 2 tones here, depending on, as we remember, depending on what the wool was treated with before it entered into the dye bath. So we have dark red and pink.
Bien, entonces pasamos al otro recipiente donde vamos a hacer el color mágico, que es el índigo.
And this is the blue, which is the
Aquí
magic
vamos
color.
el blue necesitamos poner un poquito de cal y jugo de piña para poder disolver el índigo.
So we're going to dissolve the indigo with a little bit of lime, calcium carbonate, and the juice of pineapple.
Y aquí está el índigo para poder disolverlo con el jugo de piña y después ya ponerlo al recipiente.
Y agrego la cal. Esa es la cal.
There's the cal going in to dissolve with it.
Y aquí vamos a agregarlo, disolverlo en agua.
So Jacobo, I don't remember hearing you talk about it's 50 kilos of leaves to come up with a 10 kilo masa ball. Para necesite 50 kilos de las hojas de índigo.
Así para hacer el proceso del índigo, la extracción de la planta. Esto es un trabajo muy complejo porque requiere de 500 kilos de la planta, se puede obtener 15 kilos de índigo. Es un trabajo muy elaborado.
So, translate that, Heidi.
So in order to get that little ball of blue that he now is making the dye, he has to simmer 500 kilos?
Ajá, sí, 500 kilos de la planta.
De la planta, of those leaves. So you need an incredibly large amount of leaves to make just a little bit of blue. So when you think about all the indigo that was used in blue jeans, if they used natural dyes, or is there a not natural indigo?
Now there is an aniline dye that's blue, but originally this is how they did it, even for blue jeans. And just like the red, can you imagine how many insects it took to make the British redcoats, which is where that dye came
Y
from.
vamos a introducir la madeja para el índigo y van a ver el color mágico que hace esta.
And Jacobo, Diana tiene una pregunta también. ¿Qué usa antes de descubrió el marush por amarillo?
Usamos la planta del pericón y la flor de cempasúchil.
Flor de muertos.
Flor de muertos.
Okay, so they use the marigold and a plant that's widely distributed throughout the world called pericone, which is a small weed-like plant with a yellow blossom.
Pero ahorita el amarillo del marush es el más intenso que los otros. Mire, ahorita ya va tomando color.
That's right. It's so.
Vamos a sacar el índigo. Esto es lo mágico que es el índigo. Cuando sale es verde, pero cuando le toca el oxígeno va dando el color azul, el índigo.
Can you imagine? You have to have faith, right? That when you take it out of the dye bath and it looks green, that it's going to turn blue.
With oxygen.
With oxygen.
It's a combination of oxygen that turns it blue. It's hard to understand how those green leaves make blue dye.
It is, isn't it? And how they look like a mineral.
And it makes that beautiful flat blue. It's really gorgeous.
One of my all-time favorite colors.
Y aquí vamos a hacer una mezcla del zapote negro. Este es del zapote negro. Y quiero mostrar cómo hacemos el negro más intenso.
So now we're going to see how we get that black color we were talking about. So we take the brown, one of the 4 colors that we use, and enter it into the indigo, and it gets this amazing dark black color, which you just didn't see in either Navajo weavings or Oaxacan weavings before really Jacobo discovered this method. And he's very generous with his secrets. Many families guard them forever and ever and never let them out. But Jacobo teaches these classes in Oaxaca at the Textile Museum so that dyers around the world can come and learn about how to make these amazing colors.
So Barbara, zapote negro is a fruit, isn't it?
Yes, it's a round green fruit, and the meat of it the flesh of it when it's ripe tastes like ice cream.
Este es el zapote negro.
It's el zapote negro. And when it's not ripe, it makes that beautiful brown color.
Entonces ahorita ya tenemos el negro.
So you see, now we have blue, we have black. We have yellow.
Tenemos el amarillo, vamos a hacer un verde.
Jacobo, yo tengo una pregunta.
Sí.
Porque tú tienes los cazuelas son chiquitos, pero si tú vas a hacer un tapete grande Y tú sabes que tú necesitas.
Tenemos que usar los recipientes muy grandes que tenemos.
Tenemos casos.
Tenemos casos para hacer como 10 madejas.
Ok, pero tiene que hacer todo una vez. No se puede hacer uno y después un.
No, solamente una vez.
Una vez. Entonces,
Aquí tenemos la mezcla del amarillo y verde y índigo. Aquí depende de la tonalidad del amarillo, podemos obtener los tonos de verdes.
So I don't know whether anybody understood what I asked Jacobo, but if he's going to do a big rug, he has to do it in a big recipiente because you can't get the same color. If he were to do a small amount of yarn and color it and then move on and do a second batch, it would be a different color. So the only way to get one color that's consistent for the rug is to do it in bigger vats.
So, but don't worry, they won't waste this yarn that they're coloring. They'll use it to make a cushion cover or a purse or something like that. So it won't be wasted.
I don't think I was worried.
So now we have Maria Luisa's got a yellow and a green skein she's showing you there. Like we said, we have to take a look at the oxygen. Turns it finally green. So it's an amazing color of green. I'm sorry the picture isn't better.
Y entonces con estos 4 colores básicos podemos hacer ciertas mezclas. Y ahorita vamos a mostrar los diferentes tonos que obtenemos con estos 4 productos.
Here we have the array of colors that you can get from those 4 different dye stuffs.
Aquí tenemos los verdes, los amarillos y diferentes de los índigos. Y continuamos aquí con la grana cochinilla, con el rojo podemos obtener muy diferentes tonos. Y por último tenemos los cafés del zapote negro y la mezcla del zapote con el índigo, que es el color negro intenso.
So it's pretty astounding how many colors you can get so that you can weave it into these amazing patterns that you're going to see in the rugs. So, Kobo, should we go back to our discussion for a little bit, and then we're going to look at the rugs?
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Sí.
Excellent. So you can see here's a really great picture of the green, and you can see this is the large recipiente that he's using to cook a very large batch here of wool to make into a beautiful green color. The threads here laying on the side of Jacobo's loom, you can see how tiny the threads actually are when he's making a piece on his loom. And you can see what Heidi's talking about. You can see the bright yellow and the more mustardy yellow. And Jacobo, we forgot to mention before, Heidi, that Jacobo uses gold and silver threads to create a lot of sparkle in his fine rugs.
So this piece he's working on in that picture is the Virgin of Guadalupe, and she has a lot of gold woven into her robes. And here we have Maria Luisa.
Who's an amazing weaver and has a very interesting sense of color. I love her rugs. A lot of the cochineal and pink tones, fascinating combinations of colors that she likes to do. And you can see how fine the warp and the weft is on this loom that she's making this piece with. And we're going to go and see. And this is an amazing piece of the jaguar, which is another representation from the Zapotec world. And the jaguar is dancing with the flowers of the spring, the winter, and the summer, and the fall. And one of the amazing things that Jacobo does is he creates dreamscapes sometimes with his designs. And when you look around here on this rug surrounding the jaguar, you will see the Greca design, which is a design that you will see in the archaeological sites. And Jacobo once told me that the Grecas represent the first step, birth, the second step, youth, the third is wisdom or coming of age, and the final step, which turns down, is death or perhaps heaven, and then the cycle begins again. So that you can see that that's what we were talking about, some of the mysterious language that's embedded in these symbols, and there you see that too. So you will see this one doesn't have, here, these little tiny dots along up here are God's eyes. So those are designs from their language. He often uses the cross of Quetzalcoatl, which is not particularly in this rug, but he uses the lightning and the rain as symbols here too. So we can ask Jacobo, if you have a Jacobo rug, he's more than happy to tell you what the symbols mean, because they're not just random symbols, they actually have meaning. So here you can see these are arrows. Here we were talking about the God's eyes. And you can see the very fine weaving that are in these rugs up close in this particular picture. And here's a rug that I happen to own, so I'd love to put this picture up. And it won the first prize in 2017. And I have it on my wall. I drink my coffee every morning gazing at it. So his pieces are collected in the Oaxaca Textile Museum, the Peter Gray Museum in Oaxaca, in Puerto Vallarta, and they were featured in galleries in San Antonio and Seattle, and they live on many walls and floors around the country. Here's one that we were talking about, the symbology. This is the Zapotec diamond, and you can see some other looks like archaeological features here, which you can find on the ruins. So I hope you'll go to Oaxaca, you'll look at the ruins, and then you'll come and see these designs represented right here in Jacobo's beautiful pieces. And here's some more pictures of some of his rugs, some for the floor, some other designs. And here are two people that we particularly love who are collectors of Jacobo's amazing works. And I want to read a quote from James, which he gave some years ago. And here they have one of the amazing designs in their background. Folk art is an intrinsic part of Mexican culture, with astounding variety, from the northern state of Chihuahua to the southern tip of Chiapas and the Yucatan. It's an important part of the economic fabric of many indigenous communities. And even though much of it is made for personal or local adornment, some makes its way to the finest museum, and many pieces make their way to the home of James and Louise. So they have a wonderful collection of Jacobo's rugs, and I wish we had a way to see them all today, because they're amazing. So here's another amazing piece with interesting color patterns in it. And here's a collection, a piece that Maria Luisa made, a piece that Jacobo made, and an early piece of Jacobito's with a figurative theme. Okay, so now we're going to go back to Jacobo, and we're going to look at his looms and see how he sets up the looms. Okay, Jacobo, vamos. Where did you go?
Bueno, esto es el telar, donde estoy haciendo una pieza fina, una pieza de seda y con hilos de casimir.
So this piece is silk. It's very fine. So you can see he's working with small spools of thread rather than the yarn on the thicker pieces.
Sí, esta es una pieza del dios zapoteco, del Quetzalcoatl.
This is he's designing with the Quetzalcoatl god of the Mesoamerican fame.
Y aquí estoy ocupando los colores básicos, que es el rojo, el azul, el amarillo y las líneas en negro.
So he's using the basic colors and the lines, the extra lines in black. So this will be a very fine piece.
The other thing that I had asked the other day, if you're doing Quetzalcoatl, how do you know is the design is under the tread, under the weft. The design is on a piece of paper of this figure. Am I clear on this?
Yes.
Jacobo,
su diseño está abajo, ¿no?
Sí, no tenemos una línea donde tenemos algunos puntos de guía para hacer el diseño. No sé si se ve muy suave. Pero tenemos tenemos un papel, un patrón, y después ponemos algunas líneas y podemos guiarlo como base. Pero todo lo demás, nosotros como artesano, lo interpretamos. Entonces formamos otra parte según nosotros lo inspiramos.
So they actually use a lot of personal inspiration when they're doing these. So they only have certain points to kind of delineate where the design begins and ends. So Jacobo often interprets things completely on his own and from dreams of his that he has. One time I asked him, so where do you get these ideas about what you're going to weave? And he told me I asked him, what inspires you? What's your source of inspiration? And he told me that these pieces are inspired during sleep. But in everyday life, you begin a thought about nature, the air over our heads, our feeling and mood of every day, and we think of colors, and we choose from different colors to design our pieces according to design. So sleep helps us a lot to guide our inspirations for designs and which bright colors to use. So everything that happens to us in our daily lives is important for our creation of our pieces and the colors. He said that something is very important is when you're happy and you're working rug designs and colors, they come out very nice and cheerful. But if you're not happy, things go wrong. So the art of weaving is like the life of a human being, always there to give you life so you can bear good fruit.
Estoy ocupando la seda, el alpaca y el merino. Y esta es un poco lana de cashmere.
And cashmere.
Entonces ahorita estoy formando aquí un diseño con los mismos colores.
Here Maria Luisa is making a design from those colors and with the different types of wool that she just mentioned to us.
Diferentes diseños, diferentes colores. Y aquí vamos a pasar para mostrar el telar de Jacobito. Está haciendo una pieza muy, muy fina, de puro de seda.
This is a piece that Jacobito is working on right now that's completely silk threads.
So that will only be used on the wall, and it looks fairly big.
¿Qué tamaño es, Jacobo?
Este es un tamaño de 70 centímetros por 1 metro con 20 centímetros. Va a tener cuando esté terminado.
So it is large.
Se va por el pared, no se va.
Exactamente. Sí, esto va a ser para el muro, para la pared.
Sí.
Here we see Jacobito working on it himself.
Aquí estoy trabajando la pieza, que esta pieza tiene 20 hilos por pulgada. A traditional rug making in Teotitlan has 6 or 7 warp per inch, and now I'm working with a 25 warp per inch, and it's very, very fine, and the material is fine too.
Do you like working with seda?
¿Cómo?
Do you like working with silk, Jacobito?
Yeah, I love it. I love working with silk. It's very hard, but it's amazing work for my pieces.
And do you like making the geometric designs or your more free-form designs, your figurative designs? Which would you prefer?
¿Podría repetir otra vez, por favor?
¿Prefieres trabajar con los diseños geométricos o los de figuras?
Estoy trabajando ambos ahorita, pero me gusta más los geométricos. Ahorita vamos a pasar al telar, que estoy haciendo un símbolo zapoteco. Súper. Aquí estoy haciendo un diseño de un símbolo zapoteca. Se le llama los sellos de México. Y no es geométrico. Comienza una parte con geométrico, pero no todo es geométrico. Tiene la parte principal en círculos. Y esto es de un material de alpaca.
Fabulous. I want you to know that Jacobito is not just a weaver, he's a law student. So.
And the cameraman.
And the cameraman. Our technician.
Okay.
Are we ready to go to the rug show?
Sí, exactamente. Estamos aquí en la galería de los tapetes.
We're going to go back for a minute and show people some information about your looms that they might be able to see a little better.
Este es el muro de los tapetes finos.
Espérame.
Okay.
Okay, so I wanted to show you because this is a clearer picture of what the loom looks like. And I think you can really see it there. And you can see Jacobo also has really large looms, but they're not here in this particular Dyer. So looms were introduced, the pedal loom was introduced in 1535. Before that, they wove on backstrap looms. Okay, and we saw the colors. He showed us all the fabulous colors and the threads. And we're going to go back now to Jacobo, and we're going to have the rug show. Okay, ándale for the rug show. Here we are in the gallery.
Muy bien, pues estamos en la galería y este es un trabajo que estoy realizando, una colección privada de mis tapices con tapetes que son de seda y del mismo peine que les dije de 25 hilos por pulgada, 25 per inch, and the designs are represent the contemporary designs and the symbols of the Zapotec. Yes, right.
Aquí vamos a mostrar una pieza igual de combinación de seda y lana merino.
This merino and silk, and it's also a figurative design with lots of indigo. It's hard to see it. Is it a tree, Jacobo? ¿Es un árbol?
Sí, esto es una composición de un árbol zapoteco y del acompañado del maguey, del mezcal. Este es un maguey.
A maguey and a tree, and it looks like some ducks over here, and the stars and the moon. So this is something that would be absolutely considered a dream rug, I think. So we can see the different sizes here. Comes in, you can have runners, you can have large floor rugs. Jacobo does in fact make.
Te voy a mostrar un pequeño pero muy fino. Este es un diseño geométrico. Se puede ver.
There we go. That's beautiful. That's the diamante, the diamond.
Pero esta es una miniatura, pero sin embargo tiene mucha figura.
Yes,
Este es un tamaño de 40 centímetros por 50. Y tenemos telar, el más grande que tenemos ahorita es de 3 metros de ancho. Podemos hacer una pieza de 3 metros de ancho y lo largo se puede hacer 2, 3, 4 metros.
So the widest that they do now in one piece would be 3 meters or 3 yards plus a little by however many meters you want it to be long. And here's another fantastic
up to 4 meters. Up to
up to 4 meters long.
Yo tengo en la mano un diseño muy tradicional y representativo de la región de Oaxaca, de Teotitlan del Valle, que son las grecas. Se llama greca de flor.
This is the flower greca, a very traditional design for Zapotecs.
Y el material es muy fino, el material es todo de alpaca, que tiene una textura muy suave y muy fina.
So it's alpaca, and so it's very fine and very, very soft.
Aquí tenemos otra pieza, el diamante zapoteco.
I'm sorry, it's a little hard to see the colors, but you can get, I think, an idea about what's available. And we can put a link to their gallery of rugs in the chat so that you all can access it as well.
Este es también puro material de alpaca.
Oh, I love the one you have in your hand, Jacobito. It's fantastic.
Sí, esta pieza igual es una de las más recientes del taller.
This is one of the recent ones that they've been working on. And this one is a floor one. You can see it doesn't have any fringe on it, so it makes it really easy to use on your floor. And because your vacuum cleaner won't destroy the fringe. But wow, that's fabulous.
Aquí hay otro, diferente diseño.
Los diamantes se ven como están en fuego. Fantástico.
Esto es diamante combinado con greca.
Diamonds with grecas. Fantastic.
Igual con puro material de alpaca.
Alpaca, also a really good one for the floor. The alpaca is very strong and very soft.
Es muy resistente la alpaca y muy suave a la vez.
So it's something you really want to put your feet on. So when you want to walk barefoot in your house, these rugs are a really great addition. I like them beside my bed. All my beds have Jacobo's rugs next to the beds because they're fabulous to put your feet on.
Y tenemos la otra pieza. Este es un pasillo. Yo lo tengo doble. Está doblado, pero tiene 3 metros de largo.
So this is 3 meters long and it's for a hall.
No, I don't think so.
Mide 80 centímetros por 3 metros de largo. Ya se ve más. Y tenemos otro pasillo.
Another hall rug, fantastic.
Igual del mismo tamaño.
You can tell they've been really busy during the pandemic making rugs.
Aquí tenemos otro con la greca tradicional de Mitla.
This is the Mitla Greca we were talking about. That's one of the archaeological sites. And here you have a link in your chat for their catalog. So you can go to that link and you can see the rugs and you can see the prices, and we hope somebody will be inspired to get one. Are we ready to do?
O pura grana cochinilla.
Here's a piece with just cochineal and yes, ask a question.
How long does it take to make a rug?
Jacobo, ¿cuánto tiempo para hacer una tapete como tenga en tu mano?
Esto dura de 20 días.
20 days to make the rug that he has in his hand.
Como 8 horas de trabajo diario.
So I have a funny little story to add to that, because in the gallery where I talk about all the different artisans and their work, that's a very typical question. How long does it take? And one of my artists said to me, I don't understand why they always ask me, how long does it take? She said, if I didn't feed my children, I could work harder.
Aquí tenemos nada más de los tonos diferentes de los colores.
That's a beautiful rug.
Oh my gosh.
Very modern.
Y aquí tenemos un jaguar
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow, another jaguar.
rojos, que es un dios zapoteco, guardián de los zapotecas.
Amazing.
I think quite a number of people, quite a number of people who are here with us today have rugs of yours, Jacobo. Algunos participantes que están aquí tienen su-
Y después también, si quieren contactarnos, podemos enviarle muchos más fotos de los tapetes que tenemos por email, correo, y podemos hacer los contactos directos.
Más regaño.
So you can actually contact Jacobo directly. I think Jacobito put their email in the chat. So if you can see the chat, you can see Jacobito's email.
The other thing we want you to know is that hypothetically, because we're so good at this, we're going to be on YouTube, and you'll be able to access this and share it with your friends. And